This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. So we know the Browns defense was bad last year. And we know that the Browns secondary had some issues. And I've said this a lot when I came up with my expectations for the defense. And some of y'all thought that those expectations were low. I was making the point that we have to consider how much ground this team has to make up. That there's more to being a good defense and executing at a high level than just having good talent and good coaching. A lot of this takes time to gel. A lot of this takes having some chemistry. A lot of this takes work and time. And that's not to say that you can't get to a working state without all of that extra stuff. They can, but to operate at the level of a Philadelphia Eagles, that takes a couple of years to get to that point, right? Where you have worked with everybody on that line and that defense. You've been in this system for a little while, and you're able to operate at the highest level with the highest levels of talent. Right now, the Browns have really good talent. I believe they have really good coaching, but what they don't have is really good chemistry. So I don't think we're going to be able to see in year one this defense click and play at such a high level that we're talking about them as one of the better defenses in the league. And one of the reasons I think they have a lot of ground to come up on is when you look at the sheer amount of improvement that they have to do on the defensive line just around Myles Garrett to get these numbers to a respectable state. Because I brought this up on Twitter, and I'll bring it up here again now. The Browns last year, if you take out all of the Myles Garrett stuff, they combined, every defensive lineman, let me make this clear, right? Because linebackers and DBs, they had 8 sacks and I think 26 pressures. We know Myles Garrett had 16 sacks and 38 pressures. How many did the other 9 defensive linemen, so I'm talking about 3 techs, D tackles, and other edge rushers, all of the other guys, 9 other players combined for 10 sacks and 46 pressures? That's how pathetic the help is. Now, the good news is that help is on the way, right? Agbo is coming up here. He had 5 sacks, 17 pressures last year. Dalvin Tomlinson had 2.5 sacks, 14 pressures last year. And Zadarius Smith had 10 sacks and 34 pressures. You add that together, you get 17.5 sacks and 65 pressures. It's a massive, massive upgrade to this defensive line. So all of a sudden the help goes up over 10 pressures, over like 7.5 sacks. You're going to get your sacks from DBs. Maybe you get more, maybe you get less because the defensive line is better. It can really shake out either way. But let's say you get the same amount of sacks from your linebackers and your DBs. Like you get 8 sacks and 26 pressures. We can add that all together, and still the Browns wouldn't be that impressive of a defense, right? If they made all of the improvements on paper that they could, right? If Zadarius Smith repeats the season he had last year, if Agbo repeats the season he had last year, if Dalvin Tomlinson repeats the season that he had last year, and you add Myles on top of that, repeating the season that he had last year, getting 3 straight seasons of 16 plus sacks, you still are like 13th in the league in sacks. So in order to get into the top 5 in the NFL in sacks, which last year, the Philadelphia Eagles had 70, the Kansas City Chiefs had 55, the Dallas Cowboys and the New England Patriots had 54, and the New Orleans Saints had 48. So in order to get to that top 5, we're talking about 48 plus sacks. That's what you need to get into that category. Right now with the Cleveland Browns, if everybody repeats and does what they did last year, you're probably getting 41 and a half. So you need to find a way to get like 7 more sacks. Where are those 7 sacks coming from? Okay, let's say that Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith, they improve 4 sacks between the both of them. So we get 4 of those sacks between those two dudes. Okay, cool. Who are the other 3 sacks going to? You can look at maybe Agbo getting those 3 sacks. You get, but then you're thinking about how ridiculous that would be on the defense. I don't know how many times this has happened that you would have somebody, 2 guys with double-digit sacks, right? Because we're saying that Zadarius and Myles are going to get double digits, and potentially a 3rd guy with double-digit sacks, or at least at close to double digit with 9 with Agbo. Maybe you think some of these sacks are going to come from Perion Winfrey. Maybe you think some of these sacks are going to come from Siaki Ika. Maybe you think Isaiah McGuire. Either way, that's the issue, right? When we're talking about top 5 here and there, and I'm not even getting to the pressure numbers where the Browns still aren't that high in pressures when you add up all of their pressures, where they had 129 total. Even if you add in the new free agency people, that would still put the Browns at the bottom half of the league. Now, that's going to go up in part just because Jim Schwartz is going to be blitzing more, but you're talking about going from 129 to the top of the league is 178. There's a lot of movement that you need to make there. And I'm not making these videos to throw water on people's high expectations or hopes. I'm doing this not to just protect Browns fans or anything like that. I'm doing this to put a fair baseline out there, because sometimes people put out high expectations in bad faith. Sometimes people put out high expectations because we're just excited. It's kind of hard to tell the difference in the moment. And to protect yourselves from, being a prisoner of the moment, or just being a prisoner of somebody else's unreasonably high expectations because they want to find a way to be disappointed in the team in some way, shape, or form. Like, we've all seen this happen with something, right? Where would it be, oh, well, if this player doesn't get 1,300 yards, they're a bum. And they're asking a player who's never had like 1,000 yards to get 1,300 yards because they want to set the bar unreasonably high and act like they're doing it to be a good guy. Like, oh yeah, I just believe in this player, that's why I'm doing that. When sometimes they're being kind of like openly two-faced about it. So that's why I think it's really important this offseason to just set a baseline of expectations and to talk about what these improvements are going to look like and what they aren't going to look like. Because I've noticed the first 5 weeks of every Brown season, there's some kind of disillusionment going on despite the numbers not supporting that. And that's because every offseason we get stuck in hyperbole world, where we're like talking about every player getting career highs. Agbo's going to get 10 sacks. And if you don't think that, you're a hater. Zadarius is going to get 15 sacks and Myles is going to get 22 sacks or something like that. And I'll say that jokingly, but there are some people who hear those numbers and go, yeah, that's about right. That's about what I expect. And we know we do this because what do every single one of us do the second we get the new Madden? What's the first thing every single one of y'all watching this video does if y'all get the new Madden, right? If y'all still get Madden. Because I know what I do. Go to Madden. It corrects some ratings that I feel like are a bit wrong, right? All of a sudden I'm raising JOK's awareness to like 92 to match up what I feel about him. And that's kind of like part of the fun of being a fan. I'm not trying to take that away from you. If you want to open up Madden day one and get those dudes all the way up to 99 so you can dominate, that's cool. Just understand that's a fantasy though. Like we're just trying to live out a fantasy. when we do that. The problem is when we apply our fantasy expectations that we have because we're just excited about the team to real life expectations during the season. And then we end up very disappointed in performances that are actually not that bad. And then our reaction to it leads into a larger negative public reaction that player starts to see. He starts dealing with that negative public reaction. That actually starts to affect his play. And then it starts to spiral itself out of control. This is something that goes on every season. I've seen it. Every year that I have been on this website covering this team, this has been something that happens because it's not because we're like the most cynical fan base. I honestly believe it's because there's a lot of us that are very optimistic, and then there's a lot of us that are just cynical. And honestly, it just has to do with there being a lot of people that like the Browns, that you get this weird combination that builds into a fever pitch in the offseason. And again, I'm not trying to tell you not to be excited. I'm not trying to tell you not to get the Madden and make the Browns the best team on Madden and beat everybody by 40 and change the sliders just to make you feel good about the team. That's not what I'm saying. Do that. I'm going to do it. It's fun. What I am saying is some of these expectations we have are a bit much. Do I think this Browns team's going to be good? Yes. Do I think this Browns team could win 12 games? Yes. Do I expect them to win 12 games? No. Do I expect them to make the playoffs? Yes. Right? Expecting them to make the playoffs and expecting them to win 12 games, not the same thing. Sometimes in this period of the year, it does feel like the same thing. My base expectations for the Browns are make the playoffs. However many wins get you into the playoffs, I don't care, make it. Like, yeah, I'm not about to sit here and pout and bitch and moan about a team that has 9 wins but made the playoffs. Like, the goal is to make the playoffs. If you make the playoffs, you make the playoffs. Right? What you do in the playoffs, that's a different story. But I'm not about to sit here and be super arbitrary about a win total. If 11 wins get you in the playoffs, cool. If you win 12 wins, but you lose all the important games during the season and you don't make the playoffs, well, that's going to be a disappointment. Right? It just is. There are multiple ways you could get to a win total, not make the playoffs, and it'll be a disappointment. Or you could get to a win total, not make to the playoffs, and still be disappointed. What we want is the result, not just the arbitrary number that comes along with it. So whatever win total gets this team in the playoffs, I want it. I don't know what win total that will be. Sometimes it's 9 in the AFC. Sometimes it's 11. Like, straight up, the Browns had to win 11 games in 2020 to get into the playoffs. Last year, but the year after, Pittsburgh only had to win 9 to get into the playoffs. It can be anything. Just getting in is important, though, right? Because if you do, again, that example I brought up earlier, if you get to 11 wins, but you don't make the playoffs because every single tiebreaker game that you played, you lost, well, then that's not good. I'm not about to be whippity-doo. It's 11 wins. Like, you obviously lost some important games. We're obviously not going to feel good about that. We're obviously going to be very upset. And some of us are going to want Kevin Stefanski fired because of that. Some of us. So I say that to have a conversation, not just about the defensive line and not just about how the help has gotten so much better. Like, the help around Myles Garrett has gotten so much better that in our minds, we feel like that improvement to help alone should make this go from a bad defense to one of the best defenses in the NFL. What we aren't factoring in is how awful the help was before. Like, if we got this much of an improvement, like this looks like a big amount of improvement, right? But we're making that improvement when the bar was like, let's say the Browns defensive line help was like right here. We made the same amount of improvement, but we only this much above the bar, if you know what I mean. Like, we were so below average around Myles that even that massive improvement is only going to bring us but a little bit above average, and that's okay. You know, maybe once you get somebody to be opposite of Myles permanently, or maybe Zadarius and Myles just click and they end up becoming a long-term partnership for the next 3-4 years, and then they figure it out, and then JOK in a couple of this year, and then at the end of this year, and then at the beginning of next year start to figure it out, and then you get to the points where this defense is clicking and playing at a high level and really like on the same page all the time, and then we get that top 5 defense. But top 5 defenses, yes, every once in a while you'll get a defense that shows up and improves and gets much better year over year. But a true top 5 defense, like a defense that we're talking about as one of the best defenses in the NFL, not because they're top 5 in one arbitrary category, like a true top 5 defense, those take a couple of years to get to where they need to get. But that's my thoughts on that. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. You guys have a great day. Have a good night.